Funky sound. Okay, welcome to Panakal Podcast for Geeks, the show about good friends hanging out, talking about the things I love. All of a sudden, my headphones just started making a weird sound. So, Tawny, if you're watching, tell me if you can't hear any of us. Our guest today is Slayz, whose real name I just learned 2 weeks ago, Marissa, and my co-host Andrew Sides. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Good. Thanks for getting up at what time is it there now? 2:30 in the morning.
2 a.m. 2
2 a.m.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
2 a.m.
You are a soldier. Thank you so much.
It's very commendable of you. Like, I was telling Andrew, I didn't realize what time it was there until literally 2 hours ago when I messaged him to say, yeah, man, it's 2 o'clock in the morning for her when she gets on. And that spiraled into a conversation. Well, he was like, how do you guys know each other? I'm like, we just know each other from Twitter, basically. And I was just like, let me put it this way. Even my friends here would not get up at 2 a.m. to get on the show, all right?
Yeah.
So
I'm like, oh, that's fine. I'm used to it,
Yeah. You mentioned that. That's cool. So, I was gonna talk initially. I was thinking we could start talking about what you do for a living, which is you do a lot of stuff with game development, game design, and then esports, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think of esports, my brain automatically goes to League of Legends.
Mhm.
But then you just name drop like 4 games. Before we went live.
Yeah, I started on Overwatch in 2016, first as a semi-professional player. And then I realized that next to my studies, it was taking a lot of time because when you're an e-athlete, you have to train, you have a whole schedule to have. And
Sure.
I didn't like that aspect, but I knew the game well. And as it came out in 2016, well, we realized we needed people that knew the game, but would like to organize tournaments on it because it's fun to have teams, but we actually need some tournaments so they can compete on. So I
Sure.
started organizing tournaments in Switzerland. In lands that would range from 20 to 2,500 players. And in the end, I ended up working on League of Legends as well, retimed Fortnite. I even have a Valorant tournament tomorrow that I'm hosting online and handling with a team.
Valorant is beautiful.
Yeah. So we have many things that we do in esports. And since 2021, I've been hosting as well. We had, I did a monthly esports and gaming show where we had gaming news, topics. I was working with Red Bull for that. And I also host main stages live. I mean, we do have some streaming things that I do, but there's also all the having a huge main stage with people in the public. And that is quite different because when you have a chat and a stream, it's always a bit easier. I never noticed until I had a few thousand people in front of me and I was like, hi, I see you.
I have a friend here who he's a really good friend from Chicago who also does some esports commentating. He's been doing but he does like Street Fighter. I don't know if he does like the MOBAs, but he does like Street Fighter. I know he does like Mortal Kombat, I believe, and stuff like that. He works for I don't know if you know Low Kick. He works for a company out here called Low Kick.
Haven't heard of it. Yeah,
so I don't know if they've come to Europe yet, but it does sound cool that
the fighting games we had Super Smash Bros. Ultimate worldwide that had a huge impact. I mean, this last year was the year of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for me in terms of esports because many games they've been doing really well, but we know them. Even if Valorant is quite new, we know it's working. It's Riot behind it, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is quite different because Nintendo is not entirely behind it compared to other games, even if they do have something to say at some point. But you have a whole major circuit around it, smaller tournaments. They've got weeklies. So compared to other games, it's really impressive that the whole community that you have around it. Fighting games in general, the community is very interesting and very different from other games, I'd say. Also because of the dynamic, because usually it's 1v1.
Right.
So I do think it's very interesting games.
I mean, it's like I didn't realize. So, like, my take on my play. What's the word I'm looking for here? I've played Super Smash Brothers, but at a very casual level. with my cousins, right? I'm sure Andrew has too. And then you see people out there at a competitive level. It's the same thing with, so I mentioned my friend Seth. The first time I realized, like, Street Fighter is a game I used to play at the arcade, where I played it like casually. You're playing your friends, you do a couple moves, you win the round, you move on. But I've watched these guys play, and they know, like, the nuances to the game, right? The little, like, you could tell just when they're playing, they'd be like, this guy's about to do this move. And I'd be like, how the hell did you notice that, right? And it's like, and then League, I tried playing, what's the one from Blizzard?
The Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah. So that my friends are like, if you want to play some League, you should play Heroes of the Storm, because if you can't do Heroes of the Storm, you're definitely not going to last in a game of League. And I was like, okay, dude, I played Heroes of the Storm for like 3 days, and I was like, I can't. So I don't know how you guys process that stuff, but like my brain definitely is not cut out for those kind of games.
For MOBA, is it primarily like my first instance of like understanding what esports was when I saw like professional StarCraft tournaments.
Oh yeah,
and like
those get wild.
Yeah, like it's insane the amount of clicks they do within a minute.
The amount of inputs they're gonna put. You're like, how do you play so fast? Even on fighting,
no idea.
When you see them live and you look at them on the controller and you're like, how do your fingers move so fast? Because like even guitar players, you would be like, wow.
Right. Well, some of those guys have like custom like builds, right? Like,
some have custom builds, some have. There's actually a small market of people customing controllers and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, Seth had a custom like a joystick, like it looked like an arcade style joystick, and I was just like, cool. And they're super expensive, and I mean, if that's what you do, that's what you do. So like,
actually, like, oh wait, sorry, I have one other question regarding the controller. Then, like, do they not like have a standard that they set for the tournaments where it's like you have to use the controllers we provide if they're allowing like custom controllers and stuff, or?
It really depends on the tournament, because depending on the tournament, they have to provide some of the setups and sometimes controllers as well. Usually in big tournaments, you will set a bar and you're like, okay, this is this type of controllers. If you want to bring yours because you're more comfortable, because you have some adjustment for your hands, or it's a flashy like it, you can. But you have to set the standard, because, for example, that's a case I had on Overwatch. I had a player once who was like, can I play with my graphic tablet? And I was like,
how?
So you can click head, literally? I was like, maybe not. Because if you map correctly the controls on it, that can be complicated. And I was like, well, maybe not then. Just play with the mouse and that will be fine.
Oh yeah, I mean, any players are playing first-person shooters with a mouse are super fast, man. Like I played Destiny, but I don't play it on the PC because I suck at PC games. I didn't grow up on PC games; I grew up on console games, right? But now so Tawny, if she's still listening, she played with us on Destiny once, and then what ended up happening was PC players were jumping into our game with cross-platform, and PC players are just much better. Their aim assist is much better, And
it is really hard to learn, because I also come from the console world, and I remember playing some FPS on my PlayStation 2 with my brother. I was playing other games on PlayStation 1, but on PlayStation 2, I stumbled upon Battlefront with all the Jedis and the Stormtroopers, and that was really amazing. And the first time I went on an FPS on a computer, I was like, what's happening? I can't hit anything.
Yeah.
Now it's fine. Now I have quite a decent level.
Yeah, I try to play Red Dead with Tawny on PC, and I played on the keyboard for like an hour, and then I dug out my old Xbox controller and set it up, because I was like, there's no way I can do this. But
I got so used to having a keyboard and a mouse that when I started playing Last of Us 2 after a few years, I was like, how do I aim for those freaking zombies? I was like, those infected are too fast.
They're
it was
fast.
Just my control, and I was like, damn, wait, I can't aim.
Have you been watching the new show?
Yeah, right. It's amazing.
I will jump to a different subject for 1 second and ask you what you think about it. Don't give away any spoilers, obviously, because I don't think everyone's finished.
I really like it because if you played the game, you have some camera plans sometimes where it's kind of like you're in the game when they're in the car, for example, and you have all the actions, and it reminded me of all those moments. And they bring the stress even as a spectator. You can see it, all those informations, and they do add a bit more details to the story than the game did. So it's not just like we just film some people do the exact same thing as in the game. Right. So, and they bring this little touch that is very interesting and spot on, in my opinion. Without spoilers, I know that a lot of people loved the third episode. Some complained and they were like, but I don't understand. It doesn't do a lot with the stories, but actually there's a lot of context with the apocalypse, how it came, and that's that I love with this series, as well as with the game.
Excuse me.
Because sometimes you're like, apocalypse, boom, zombies. So here there's like the whole development that how it became this sour, what happened. Because in real life, if this were to happen, I think we would handle it quite the same, if not worse. Right. I mean, that was badly handled. But I don't think it would do better in real life, actually.
No, but I mean, just that you get the two sides of the story, right? You have the people that are like survivalists, and then you have the people that are like in episode 3, you get these two individuals who basically built a life knowing the world is burning around them still, right? And it's just like, it's kind of
cool. You can make the most of it. I mean, if you can't change the world, just try to find a solution that fits with you.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't. I get the truists who are like, that's not how the game is. I want to see the game. It's like, relax, man.
Well, you already have the game though. Like,
right, you have the game.
If you want to see the game, you have the game.
Right, go play the game.
I did enjoy the few instances where there were like very obvious like kind of game elements that happened in the show. Sure. Like I was laughing with my wife when like a burning car would cut off 2 people, and all of a sudden it's like we have to find a way around. I was like, that's a video game thing. I know that from a mile away.
Yeah.
Or the same thing when, like Tess and Joel arrive at a building and there's like some rubble and way. They're like, one of us has to go around and there's time for exposition. I was like, that's a video. I know this. This is a video game convention that happens every single time.
The rhythm is the same as in the game. They have a good, they alternate well between all those moments, between actions, contemplation, surge. And that's something that was very well done in Last of Us, in my opinion, because it's a survival game technically, but you don't have infected people just jumping at you all the time.
Right.
But they still wire your brain in a way that you still expect it to happen, but at the same time, you have all those moments where you can just chill, enjoy the view. And they do that in the series well so far, I think. Like, you're like, there's a stress. They build up the tension, and in the end, you're just going to watch some beautiful post-apocalypse landscape. And then you have zombies.
Well, it's
but
like,
they play it well.
I like, so like when I was talking to my cousin about this, he mentioned how like these people are like walking from point A to point B, and they never really like interact with other humans initially. And he's like, where's everybody else? I'm like, they're probably moving around too, man. Like, and or they're actually there with them, but they're like hiding because they don't want to interact with each other, right? They want to. Yeah. But this is not a conversation about the Last of Us, so let's move forward. I was going to ask you about Red Bull. Like, what's it like working with, like, so you said you mentioned you work with Red Bull. You don't work for Red Bull, right?
I work with them. So when they need me to host something,
so you're like a contractor for Red Bull, basically?
And stuff. Yeah, they mandate me. Okay. So, like, I have a lot of freedom this way, because if you work with them, for them, you have some obvious brand contracts. With them, you have a lot of freedom. But you have a lot of bonuses. That's quite good.
Got a ton of Red Bull, man.
I was actually surprised because they are really human for a big company. And the guy who's in charge of the gaming branch in Switzerland is really an amazing guy. His name is Thomas Riediker. And I remember when I had to do my monthly shows with them, before it started, my co-host had to be changed because of schedule issues. The guy was really amazing. And he was the poster of the show. He was really the main host. And when they switched, they came to me and they were like, we want to check with you before we hire someone else, because we don't want you to feel uncomfortable with someone.
Right.
We want a good dynamic. We want you to have a good time during the show, and they always see how to accommodate me to the best way possible.
That's cool.
And I didn't really expect it. I mean, it's not mean for a company to be like, okay, so that's our profit, that's what we want, so that's the best situation. But they firstly came to me and were like, okay, there's a situation, we have to change the person you have to work with, but we don't want you to work with someone you don't like, you wouldn't feel okay to be with. So how do we do? Who could be a good choice? And we discussed that. And I really like that they actually came to me for that, because in the gaming industry and esports industry, as a woman, sometimes it's not always easy.
Right.
But sometimes we have interactions, but we won't talk about every problematic interaction. So they would rather have my feeling about someone and be like, okay, this guy is nice. We feel good with him. Okay, that's fine. Because I mean, if you're gonna work with this person for weeks and months,
right.
Also, the project will be better in the end. I mean, you have a nice show, good dynamic between the people. But I didn't expect them to be like, oh, so you actually have your opinion on this and it matters. We won't force you to be with someone you don't like. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, that's rare. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That's very nice.
And it's not like I'm a very famous host. That was my first gig as a host. So, I mean, they could have been like, we need someone with this profile, and it doesn't matter if you feel good or not, because we need this big person to work with you. And they weren't like that at all. So really liked it.
They sound like a solid. I'm trying to remember. I could have sworn I can't remember if it's somebody in our circle of artist friends or in my circle of like I grew up with a lot of skateboarders, so I have friends who do what do they call they're not extreme sports, and Red Bull hosts a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I know one of my friends is sponsored by them, and it sounds like all the stuff he gets from it is like Red Bull's been amazing. Like I've never heard a story where like Red Bull screwed me over, you know. But I thought I read an article about Red Bull like funding a bunch of stuff for either a athlete or an artist, but I wish I could remember what it was. But every story I've heard about Red Bull has been like the story you just said, where they're like very much like,
most of the budget goes in marketing, and they like to invest in everything. I mean, they're in gaming, they're in dance. Like in dancing, they've got lots of tournaments, and I really love what they do with the scene in general. And in Switzerland, they also have competitions. They help with events, and sometimes they like to cross all their domains. Like they did something at Lausanne Palace, and you had some video game stuff, other more serious stuff, dancing, and they like to mix things. And I like how those worlds can actually merge. Sometimes you'll be like, oh, but dancers, why would they go with players? And sometimes, but you have Just Dance technically.
You're talking like I've seen like breakdance tournaments and stuff, right?
Yeah. They do a lot of b-boying, breakdance, hip hop, and stuff. And I really like the fact that they invest in it. And you have all the extreme sports, obviously, and they're everywhere. They're kind of fighting with monsters. If you see, it's always like some tournaments. They're like, yeah, this competition is hosted by Monster. This one is by Red Bull.
Yeah, I don't think Monster's gonna beat out Red Bull anytime soon. But
no, definitely not.
I don't know enough about that.
But it's not the same company policy. But that's also something I do think Red Bull it seems at least to be pretty much the same, at least in Europe, where when they are with someone, they like to accompany the person. It's not just like, we sponsor you, give you stuff. It's like, okay, how can we do things so you're good? And that's actually business-wise, it's very important. It's like when you have a company with employees, if your employees feel well, they will talk well about the company. And then they will work better. So they will produce more, better. So it costs less in the end. So, I mean, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, no,
treat people well, and they will do well.
Totally.
A novel concept.
it's very much, it's lost on a lot of companies in the US, unfortunately. I know that feeling though. I have a couple assistants that work shows with me, and I'm always like, please tell me if like you're upset. Please tell me. Like I had an assistant who kept calling me boss, and I was like, stop calling me boss. Like I don't want you to think about. I mean, yes, I'm hiring you to do a job, but also you're my friend. So if you're not, if you're stressed, if you don't want to do something, it's better that we get it out there and you're happy, right? Like
that's something that was very important to me also in game dev, as I have my own indie game dev studio. Like the communication for me is very important, because sometimes you might have something that happens in life. For example, I had a concept artist that I hired to do some key art on a project. Sure. And he had an issue one day, a family issue, and he had to go off for 3 days. And he was like, yeah, but I was thinking of catching up on the weekend. And I was like, you have a child that's less than 1 year old. You have a weekend, you spend it with your child and your family, and we'll check with the deadline. And he was surprised. And I felt a bit sad at that moment. And I was like, but that's basic human decency. I mean, You had a family emergency. You had to take 3 days off. Well, that happens. We'll find a solution, and maybe I can postpone the deadline for 3 days. I mean, don't ruin your mental health and your family life for that.
Right. Developers are just used to like coding. So you have you have your own indie.
Yeah.
Do you have any games on the market that we know about?
We did. So the video game studio is 1 year old. We did ship a game last June for a company in Switzerland that's named Andros, because they're sponsoring. They basically do fruit juices and compotes and stuff, and they sponsor esports tournaments. And we had a huge Super Smash Bros. Ultimate tournament with all the top worlds during a music festival that's called Ikarubana. And they were like, oh, but we have a whole booth and we want people to be able to play, but we want an esport dimension to this game. So what do we do? And we ended up doing a 2D platformer game, kind of Mario-like, where you were playing a small wolf, because the mascot of the club that they're sponsoring is a wolf.
Sure.
And you had to get fruit, and we did a small leaderboard and database, so we could have all the info on the players, and the players that would have the best score would win festival tickets for the music festival of next year, and they can choose the day. And so it's a small festival, but they still had the Offsprings, Powerwolf, big names.
You had the Offspring there? Oh man, those guys are
just before the Hellfest, because it was in June, so they came to Switzerland and then they went to the Hellfest in France.
So I have a funny Offspring story. Those guys were, so when I was in my 20s, let's go with that for starters. They're in Chicago here. There's a radio station that I don't think it exists anymore. It was called Q101. So they do these giant outdoor concerts. And Offspring was on the main stage. There's 3 stages at this venue. Offspring was the second to last band to go on, and it was cold outside because it's an outdoor venue. It's probably like 40 degrees outside. Offspring finished their set, and the lead singer from that band was like, I looked around and I realized there's trash everywhere. And I thought he was going to say something like, pick it up, put it in a trash can. He goes, can you guys just pick it up and throw it up here on stage? And people lost their goddamn minds. Trash. And I was like in the gold seating area because my friend was a DJ, DJ for the radio station. So he had put us, I was in like row 16 or 17, something like that, with his brother and my other friend, and trash was like flying over us. We like ducked to get to the stage, and the stage had like 4 or 5 feet of trash on it. And the headliners, the last band was the Chili Peppers, and the Chili Peppers rep or manager came out on stage while people were throwing trash up there and said, if you guys don't quit it, the Chili Peppers are not going on stage, and this whole event is over like now. And that's what calmed people down. And it took another like 40 minutes to an hour to clear the stage of piles of trash. My friend got hit in the head with a soda can, I remember, because he passed out for a second. He was talking to us, and this can came out of nowhere, and there's no way we could have seen it coming.
What kind of soda can do you have in the US so you would pass out? Maybe
it was like a full can of Coke or something.
Okay,
it just aimed him in the head.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
I don't think they aimed it at him. I think they just chucked it, and it just happened to hit him. But I mean, we were ducked because trash cans were going over our heads, like full trash cans. And then, like I said, it was dark outside, so it was getting colder and colder. So by then the Peppers came on. It was like 40 degrees outside, and I was freezing. I was super mad at the lead singer of The Offspring. And I was like, fuck that guy. If I ever see him again. And they banned him from that. They banned that band from that venue for the next like 4 or 5 years. They were not allowed to play that.
I mean, that's understandable.
It's The Offspring, man. They just show. See, my experiences with The Offspring have been very bad, because when I was in high school, I had my partner for driver's ed was a huge Offspring fan. How do they do driver's ed in Switzerland, by the way? Because that would be an interesting thing to like in high school. We had a parking lot and we had a driver's ed instructor. He would sit in a tower. We would tune the radio to like AM something, and he would speak to us and tell us where to drive around in there. My friend would listen to Offspring the whole time. So whenever I would switch back to the AM station, you'd hear the guy yelling at me. My instructor would be like, Panakal, I told you to make a right. And I'd be like, something's wrong with the radio. And that's how we got away.
When you drive in Switzerland, so firstly, you can, with the car, you can start when you're 18.
Sure.
With motorbike and small scooters, you can start when you're 16, but it has to have to not be too powerful. But with the car, usually you first have to do some sanitary class to learn all the basics. If you have to reanimate someone, all those basic health stuff, then you can
reanimate someone. Okay, by the way, I like how you said that.
I mean, you're in an accident, that might come in handy.
Sure.
Like, how do you do all the first basic health stuff? Like, how do you check if someone is still alive? What's happening? How do you handle basic things?
We don't have to do any of that here, by the way.
Yeah, well,
shocking. Actually, it really would be useful.
It would be useful.
That's actually the first thing you have to do, and then you can do a theory exam, and this theory will just teach you all the basics of what's happening on the road. That might help before you actually start driving.
Sure.
And once you have that, you can drive with someone, either an instructor, either you can go with someone who's at least 23 years old and has had their driver license for at least 23 years old, and at least 3 years. Because technically, if you're 18, you could accompany someone at 21, but they decided that you are not mature enough at 21 if you pass your driver's license at 18. So when you're 23 and you have at least 3 years of driver's license, you can take someone. It's not mandatory to have lessons with an instructor, but usually I would highly recommend it because you have a lot of traps when you have the exam, and it's really important that they teach you all those traps, because when you're a student, you're passing the exam, you're stressed, and all the things you won't see. Now,
Sure.
for me, it's normal because I've been driving for a few years, but it's true that during the exam, if I hadn't been told, here it's a bit fishy because you don't have a lot of visibility, so they will test you on that, and you have so many things to pay attention to, at least you know those places exist. And before you actually do the practical exam, you have to do what we call sensibilization classes. But they basically tell you don't drink and drive, don't take drugs and drive.
And
it's like 8 hours of class around that. Then you can do the practical exam, and then for 3 years you're considered as young driver, and they have different rules. Like if you go past the speed limits too much, they will be more severe with you. They can take your driver's license away it's much easier. In terms of alcohol, you have to be at 0.0, but after 3 years, you can be at 0.5, like 5 per 1,000 liters. So
a little wiggle room
there.
0.00.
Because they're like, okay, you're a young driver. It hasn't been 3 years since you started driving, just like no alcohol at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Be careful, because else we would take your driver's license much quicker. We have some offense though where they would take your driver's license for a month, sometimes 3 months, and if they do that, then they add 1 year to your young driver's license. Oh. But I do think it's good. It's just that it's pretty expensive if you don't have people to drive with, because if you have to go with an instructor, it can be from 80 till 150 Swiss francs per an hour that you have to pay. So if you don't have parents or a big brother, big sister that can take you, of all the friends, that might cost a lot. But at least you still have all those steps before, because it's that's something that I've always found fun. Because in the US you can drive much earlier, but you can only drink when you're 21. Where in Switzerland you can drink beers and wine when you're 16, and strong alcohol beverages when you're 18.
Sure.
But you can only start driving when you've already started drinking. Legally.
I mean, I feel like here, if you got in a car accident, your best interest is not to touch the other party involved, because you will get sued. Well, technically the thing is, like, there's a law here that it's non-assistance to someone that's in danger.
So basically, that's the issue is like, oh, I'll have to do CPR. But technically, if you break the person's rib cage, they could be mad at you and sue you. Right. But if you don't help them and they die, but technically, if you had helped them, they could have survived. Well, you can still be sued. So you're like,
it's like a weird catch-22, man.
There's a couple places in the U.S. that are kind of like that. They're called Good Samaritan laws, where you know, if you don't help someone in trouble, then you're on the hook for whatever happened. Yeah. But few and far between.
So I mentioned before we went live that I was trying to look up interesting facts on Switzerland.
Yes.
I've never been there, obviously. I've wanted to visit there a bunch of times in my life. I never did it. So like my cousin was like, they're known for mountains, food, and clocks. And the clocks thing I remember from like, you know, everyone talks about the watches and stuff. The food thing, I try to look up some food.
Cheese, mostly.
A lot of cheese. Yeah, I was like, I can't eat any of this. Which also reminded me, when I was looking at the food thing, it reminded me of for New Year's when I messaged you because you were like, what's going on for New Year's? And I was like, I'm just playing board games with my friends. But then I also told Andrew, I was telling her how like I don't drink. So I was like, I took an edible and then my friends were like, let's play a board game. And I thought we were just going to chill and hang. And then they were like, we're going to play this board game, this complex ass board game that my brain could not process.
I will exist.
Yeah, pretty much. I looked like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't. You know, I was just like, but they all knew.
Fake it till you make it. That's fine.
Well, they knew what was going on. They called. We had dinner they were over here helping me with stuff around the house last week, and they called me out at dinner. They were like, "You were so high, you had no idea what you were doing half the time." I'm like, I warned you about what I was doing before I did it. It wasn't like I just showed up to the game like high as a kite. But
yeah,
give them a chance to win. That's fine.
There's no. So we played this game that involves. It's called Frostpunk, where you have to. It's a team. The team has to work together.
That was the game. Oh my god, I forgot that.
And I messaged Andrew about this too. I was like, you know, I literally messaged my group of friends saying, you know, this game's hard enough when you're sober, and it's impossible to play when you're pineapple. Like when you're high, it's just not happening. And I look, somehow I wasn't the one that lost the game for the group. So my one friend did some crazy stuff and we didn't have any coal. So we all died in the
altruistic people, you know.
I mean, he shouldn't have tried to get the motor going. We didn't have any coal.
Throw the game for you.
He probably did. He was just like, this guy's suffering. Let me just throw the game. But I just remember
Let's just end it all.
I just ate a ton of pizza and at some point there were cookies, and I started eating all the cookies. And my friends were like, "You're just gonna keep eating those cookies, huh?" And I'm like, "Bro, hi, like, you know, what do you want from me?" But yeah, I looked up food for Switzerland. And everything has cheese in it, and I'm just like, "There's got to be something there that's specific that I can eat if I visit." But you guys like your cheeses, man.
You have technically a rösti. That's it's basically like a potato meal. So
I saw that.
You usually have cheese with it, but you can have it a bit without the cheese.
It sounds boring without the cheese.
You can have it without the cheese, Alan, if you're a weirdo.
Yes, exactly. Here's the thing: I can have a limited amount of dairy, but I feel like if I ever visit Switzerland, I gotta like really plan out that meal.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that you can eat that are not Swiss in Switzerland, so it helps with the dairies. I actually have a friend that has a funny story with cheese because he went with his dad on a hike trip in Nepal, and they brought a fondue cheese and they shared it with the Sherpas. But Sherpas they're actually not used to eat this kind of food. It's way too heavy, so they ate this tube of bread with the cheese fondue, and they were like, "Okay, we're done, we're fine."
Yeah.
And they were like, "We like it," but usually those people, they will eat roots, dry food in general because it's very cold where they live, and they're like, "Oh, cheese fondue."
They're like, "What are you guys heating up over there? Like, we have a mountain to climb still." So the other thing I know, so I'm just gonna go down my list of cool stuff that I found out. So I found out you guys have over 7,000 lakes, which is straight bananas. Because I think in the U.S. we have like, I should have looked up what we have in the U.S., but I believe it's 250 freshwater lakes, if I'm correct. I know we have about 100 of those is in Alaska. Andrew, I see your face. That's what I'm going to say this next part. A bunch of those are in
I'm wondering,
Alaska.
what constitutes a lake in the U.S. though? Because I feel like Florida has 7,000 lakes in and of itself.
You have
I've flown over
swamps
Florida.
and
It's just
floods,
craters.
man.
Yeah.
If you check, for like I checked how many lakes are in the USA, and but if you check all the small lakes, you have about 3 million lakes in the US.
Yeah, most of them are just swimming
majority
pools.
of them are located in Alaska, and the result of seasonal snow melt. In the lower 48 states, they are estimated to be about 125,000 lakes. So
That's
yeah,
not
technically,
possible.
most of them are in Alaska.
Where the hell are we at? Where are we sitting on 125,000 lakes?
100,000 of those are in Florida.
Sometimes you have small
Those are
lakes,
ponds, man. They're counting ponds
like small
in there.
ponds,
I think
lake. That's my lake.
Check how many freshwater lakes there are in the U.S. because I'm sure it's 200 or something.
Yeah,
sure a lake is constituted as a freshwater body of water, man.
I'm just saying.
Yeah,
where do they get 7,000 lakes from in Switzerland?
Mountains. We do have a few big lakes, but we have a lot of tiny lakes. And when you go on a hike, sometimes you will plan it in the summer. And
Sure.
like, oh, there's this small lake that is very lovely, and the water that directly comes from the mountains. Mountain lakes are very different. They're like very clear water. In most lakes, you can't drink the water from the lakes, but from the rivers that go into the lakes, sometimes you can as well. So it's always fun. You have to know which type of river you can drink from. But if it comes out of the rock directly or has a high concentration of iron, so you will see on the rocks, on the rock bed, that it's kind of orange, reddish.
Sure.
You can. It's good to know in the mountains in the summer if you don't have water anymore.
Yeah.
But we
Like,
do
you
have
can't exactly filter
lake.
water up there, right?
Well, you can have, but I've never taken it, so I've never had anything to filter the water with. But I do know what I can drink from. Not so.
I feel like I would die up there somehow.
Nah.
You remember that conversation next time if I ever visit Switzerland and I die on a mountain.
I will give you a lot of good places to go to and where you shouldn't die.
Sure.
I mean, maybe with edibles that can be negotiable.
I'm not going to go on a hike on edibles. Nobody worry about that.
You'll go on a hike.
I've only gone,
and then drink the orange water, and then we find you dead.
I went to one party on an edible. I took the wrong one. It's never happened more than twice. So the other thing I noticed. So the other thing when I was looking at this, you guys have a lot of. So my cousin said they're called snow festivals.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have like ice sculptures and.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned music festivals.
It's not that popular. Just the snow cultures aspects. We do have some ice palace, as they call it, so where they do some design with just. I mean, it's cool to see, but usually it's the tourists that really love it.
Yeah, I figured tourists were the ones who are getting the highs off that.
I mean, if you see it once, you're like, yay, that's an ice statue. But usually they don't work it very well. I mean, it's just like a display for tourists, so they will pay a lot to enter an ice palace with sculptures, but it's not like a huge exhibition done by artists that actually put their craft to it.
Sure. But tourism has got to be a large part of Switzerland is tourism, right? Like.
Yeah, definitely.
Does that annoy you?
There's a lot of tourism. Some villages only live from tourism. For example, Zermatt, that's in the mountains. Very lovely place, very expensive. That's where you have the Matterhorn, which is the mountain you have on the Toblerone chocolate. You have But something that I love about there, not that it's expensive and it's very, very, it's a pain there. I mean, the ski there is amazing because you are over 4,000 meters. So you have a lot of places to go to. Very expensive again. This is a village that started developing with all the British tourists and still there's a lot of British, but there you have to leave your car at the bottom of the mountain actually, and you go there by train. So you have no cars in the village. You only have
that's cool.
the police if really needed, and they have a few buses that will drive you to the start of the skiing station.
Sure.
Which is quite good, but I really like that you can walk without being like, is anyone going to drive over me?
Right.
So it's a really lovely small village in the mountain, but for example, this would not survive without tourism. And Swiss people would like to go there sometimes because it's like there's a huge domain to ski and it's amazing, but it's very expensive. So sometimes I'm like, hey.
Yeah, I've been snowboarding and with my friends when I was really young, but my friends want to go on a ski trip. They keep asking, and I'm just like, the cost of it is so high. I'm just like, I don't really need to be in the snow like that.
Well, I'm lucky because I have France just next to me. I mean, I'm a 20 minutes drive away from France. That's cool. And everything is much cheaper there. So that's a good bargain.
You get some good pastries in France, man. I probably put on 15 pounds while I was in Paris just eating.
But that's something that's impressive with Europe, and even more with Switzerland, because we have 5 countries that actually touch Switzerland. That's something I was discussing with an Australian friend. That I was living in Sydney for a few months when I was 19. I just decided to just go there and be like, hey.
That's what you can do in
Switzerland,
if
everything goes well. I mean, in Geneva, we have 4 years of high school. So you finish in your 19th year if everything goes well. And I didn't want to go to university yet, so I just took a year off. And I had been working a lot beside my studies. So I had some spare money and I went to Australia. And when I came back, I met this guy in the plane. And he came to visit Europe. And he was like, what's amazing, it's all the different cultures that you have right next to one another. And I mean, Switzerland is a small country, and in a maximum 5-hour drive, you can just cross the whole country, and then you're in Austria. You can go to Germany, Liechtenstein, France, Italy. Like, I'm closer to Milano than I am to Paris. I'm like a 5 hours drive away from Paris and a 3 hours 45 minutes drive from Milano. Wow. So if I want really good pizza or pasta, I will just go to Italy. And I'm actually part Italian by my mother. And that's something in Switzerland also. A lot of people are actually not entirely Swiss. I'm only half Swiss. Okay. And I was the most Swiss in my classes up until university.
So that's interesting.
So a lot of people speak a lot of different languages, and that's culturally very interesting in my opinion.
What's up, Allie? Yeah. Thanks for watching. That's kind of cool that you can, man, I would love to be able to, like, what are you doing this weekend? I think I might go to Paris, you know, like, what are you doing next weekend? Let's go to Italy for a minute, you know, like.
I mean, I'm less than 3 hours away from Germany as well. So it's like, where do you want to go? You can, even if, like, Amsterdam is an 8 hours drive from my place.
Sure. But
technically.
That's a beautiful luxury not a lot of people have, man. And if I was, I mean, I told Andrew this before, if I didn't have my wife and kid to worry about, I would have bounced from here years ago. Because I fucking hate it here. But, you know, stuck here. That's the thing.
Yeah, sometimes in Europe there are things and concepts that are very complicated to understand for us. Healthcare, for example.
Healthcare is a big one. Yeah.
There's like, here it's so normal that you just go to the doctor when you want to. In Switzerland, it's mandatory to have a basic health insurance.
Yeah.
And anyway, they will cover it I think the higher you have a franchise and you have to decide. Like, mine is like the first 300 Swiss francs I pay, and then it's not on me anymore.
That sounds amazing.
Like the high one is like 2K5, something like that. So I mean, they will cover
anything's better than zero.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I see some bills from the US and I'm like, dude, well, unless you're dying, you better not go, because then you will be dying and crippling in debt.
They will, in the US, they will gouge you for everything. Like, everything. Yeah. And there's just, it's broke. The system's broken. We could talk about that if we want, but I don't want to. Like, that's a deep dive. Andrew and I will take that to places.
Oh.
You know,
I had a whole thing earlier today with someone about my MS drugs and stuff, because those things are bananas expensive.
I mean, you're dealing with, like, Andrew's had to deal with just the meds he needs. You've had to deal with insurance from the operation you had. You know, it's just like everything. And it's like, people don't care. Like, in this country, they're not like, oh, if we don't help you, you're going to die. Whatever. You're just a small cog in a very large machine, you know?
We don't have enough people in Switzerland. Maybe that's why.
Well, I feel like
there's like 8 million
obviously.
people in Switzerland, so
I
better
mean,
not lose
there's
some.
there's issues. There's other things that you have to deal with there too. But the health insurance is a big thing. Like people should be allowed to like live without having to be stressed
Yeah.
about whether like everyone here is afraid of like we're artists. So like luckily Andrew has a job that gives him some insurance. Luckily my wife has a job that gives me insurance. But I have friends who are artists that pay for insurance, and I have friends who are artists who don't have insurance, and that scares me because it's like
it shouldn't be a luxury.
it shouldn't be a luxury. You shouldn't. You should just be covered. You should be able to like live your life without thinking, what happens if I get sick?
Should I just cut my arm? That's fine. Just cut it. Take it.
Well, like my friend who I mentioned earlier, he for a while had no insurance, and I was like, bro, what are you gonna do if you get sick? Like the hospital bill is gonna be insane, and getting sick is one thing. But what if you break something? And I'm just like, like I have cousins who live in Canada who got in a crazy car wreck in I believe it was 2021, and it was all covered, But if that was here, we'd be in debt, like.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, just go back to the car accident and shift slowly some things. And
well, I'd just be like, just take my left arm. I don't really need it. My drawing arm is my right arm. Heal that thing,
have
like
some spare organs if you want to.
make me a robot, man. I'd be like, you got any tests here for Android systems? I'm in. Let's go. But like, yeah, it's just a scary thing, and that's like, you can't just you can't like take like if it was easy for Andrew and me to just take our family and move, we would. But then there's a whole other factor to deal with over there because we're not from Europe, so we have to like readjust to being in a whole different country.
I think I would.
I'm not saying we wouldn't adjust fast. We'd figure it out pretty quick, because we're pretty resilient.
My wife actually has British citizenship, so it's something we've always talked about. It's mainly just a fun thing at this point.
Take me with you, please.
Yeah.
But I had some artists from the US. Like I have a friend who's working in Ubisoft in Germany, and he was telling me that one of his colleagues used to work in the US, but it was so crazy on so many levels, even with the time you were. He was like, yeah, he was gaining his life really well, had huge salary and all, but it was like, but I was never able to actually enjoy it. So I was like, I was really well paid, but I was working so many hours a week, so close to the burnout all the time. And he was like, well, just move to Germany because it was like, now, yes, I do have a lower salary, but I actually like what I'm doing. I'm happy to wake up in the morning. I actually go home in the late afternoon, and I can enjoy my day with my family too. And that's always this crazy thing for us in Europe. Sometimes we're like, should we go in game dev at least? Should we go to the US while we're young? You do like a 2 or 3 year shot maximum, and then you come back.
No, man. If you want to take a week vacation here, go ahead and test those waters. Don't come here for 3 years.
There was
I've
one
got a few lakes to see. I heard.
No, a lake.
There was one artist. I can't remember which artist, the name of the artist, but there was one that I think he's from. He might actually be from your neck of the woods, like Switzerland or whatever. I can't quite remember, but he talked about like how he went to work he got offered to work for Blizzard, and he was like, oh, this is like my dream job. I really want to work for Blizzard. But I think he lived there and worked with Blizzard in California for about a year before he fucked off back to Europe. And he was like, yeah, I hated it. It was awful working experience.
Yeah, as a child, I wanted to work at Blizzard. I was like, because my dad is a geek, and very early he brought me to video game. That's actually my dad was like, yeah, come and play. When I was 9,
my kid is.
But he was actually monitoring me a lot, because when I was 9 years old, he put me on World of Warcraft. And I mean, I could game as long as my studies were going well. But when I was 9, it was like, oh, you have the right to play 1 hour, 1 day.
Yeah,
out of
that's
2,
cool.
like on Monday, Wednesday. So I would, and my parents were like, it's until I was 18, but I still kept doing it. Like, it's mandatory for you to do some sport. You choose. You want to go horse riding, you want to do judo, jiu-jitsu. And I did a lot of sport before I settled on some stuff. But like, at least you have one sport. Studies go well. Video games, that's fine. And it's true that when I was a child, I was like, oh, Blizzard, World of Warcraft, I love the cinematics. And I was like, yeah, I want to work for them. And then I grew up and I was like, ha, no.
Yeah.
When all the scandals came out, I was like, that's no surprise. And that's the industry that's an issue. That's also something that I didn't like. A lot of people were like, oh, Blizzard, demon. And I was like, if only that were only Blizzard.
Yeah, if only it was just
so
Blizzard.
many other people.
It's like everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't fit in the basic case of, sorry, but basic white man looking normal with a normal name, because you have to be careful with the name. It's complicated. I mean, because you could be white but have a Russian name. You're fucked.
Yeah.
You better be named like Todd.
So close, yet so far. So, I mean, yeah, you just have this very small case to fit in, and it's crazy. I've been discussing with a lot of people from game development, be it artists, developers, and it's actually so complicated. We do have issues here, but you have so many more rights covering it. Even there was the big layoff from Google a week ago, and in Switzerland, they actually received an email that said, we will announce who's losing their job, but because of laws, we can't just be like, oh, hi, bye, you're fired. They can't do that. Some people tried to log in the US, and they were like, oh, I'm logged out. I can't. I lost my accesses. In Switzerland, that doesn't work like that. So it's very good to work for big companies, but in Switzerland, because we have actually a lot of laws that protect people. Even in the gaming industry, you can't just do whatever you want.
Sure. I should get a job in Switzerland. Andrew, we should get work in Switzerland. It's nicer. They'll tell you to fuck off here. They don't care shit. That sounds. I had a friend who I have a friend. He worked for gaming. I can't remember what company it was in Switzerland, but then he moved to. He's in Manchester now. He works for a gaming house there, and he used to be here. We used to. I grew up with him. He worked for a bunch of companies out here. He worked for Ravensoft out here and stuff, I believe. And then the conditions but he went to Europe and he was like, yeah, the pay. I'm not making as much as I did in the U.S., but he's not being overworked. And like you said, like they treat their employees so much nicer and better.
He actually have a life.
Yeah, I mean, he's on a vacation like every at least once a month. He's somewhere, right? Like. And he comes to visit us here. Like he visits usually Halloween because we have a Halloween hangout with our friends here. And then sometimes in the summer because then we have a barbecue and he's visiting and we all hang out. But for the most part, he's going all over Europe. At least once a month he visits somewhere else. And I was like, it's nice. And now he's like a lead art director, I believe. So I was joking with him earlier yesterday. I was like, oh, I guess you get 7 or 8 vacations now versus your standard 4 or whatever he takes. But it's kind of nice, over here. It's like, I mean, it's really hard to take a break,
And even if you want to take a break, like if you've been going at 150 or 200% all year long with your energy, if you have a few weeks vacation, I mean, you can't fully enjoy it because you're actually wasted from all the work you put in. I mean, if your physical health hasn't given up before, your mental health will need to just rest at some point and do nothing. So even if you go for 2 or 3 weeks vacation, you have to count at least 1 week where your mental health is like not existing. So you can't really enjoy it. So having a high pay, good, I guess. Even if you invested in a house,
right?
You can't even enjoy your house. I mean, you go there, you just wasted, you barely eat something, and then you go to bed, then you go back to work and repeat. Like, what's the point? You see the salaries and you're like, wow, that's big. And you look at the whole picture and you're like, hey, okay, I'll pass.
Yeah, I'll pass on that. Yeah, that's how I remember when I had a corporate job, that's basically what it was. I was a front-end developer, so it's just work all day. I was making good money because I was, at night I'd be like, if I had time, I'd hang with my friends and we'd have a good time. Get up the next day, code again, and then repeat. And then every once in a while you relaxed. But yeah, the money wasn't that important at the end. I was just like, I left it behind. I miss it some days. Like when you have to pay some bills, you're like, oh, I kind of wish I was making that much money again. But it's not going to make or break us. Allie was asking if they do co-ops. I think if you work for a studio, I don't think it's called co-op. They do like internships and stuff, right? Like, do you guys ever bring like people in from other states to work for the company and then temporarily, like contractors, I guess? Like we have contractors here.
Well, it depends on the needs and on the company, because the thing in Switzerland is basically, I'd say we're 10 years late on any entertainment industry. Like some of our big contracts, we have to look for investors that are outside Switzerland. And sometimes it's not that easy then to, I mean, we don't have a lot of people that are actually qualified. So we find a lot of contractors and we work with, we have some mandates. But even in Europe in general, I have some friends that work in studios, and sometimes and they're like, oh, Marissa, you do some 3D. I know you can animate some game design. Would you help us on some contract? Because sometimes they need some help at one given time.
Sure.
And they can't really afford to hire someone for 1 year, 2 or 3 years on a defined contract. So we do that a lot. And sometimes, for example, when I was mentioned the gameplay developer that's from Chile and living in Chile, it's like we've been trying to hire a developer at the moment for some projects. And it's like a developer that does C++ and knows Unreal Engine. This is
rare.
So complicated, guys.
Yeah.
Like,
who studies both those things? That's a maniac level study.
But well, technically, even us, we don't care about the studies. I mean, if you know the gig and if you know what you're doing, that's fine.
Sure.
And that's what we love with game dev. It's like you can actually display what you do. If you're an artist, and I'm able to see your drawings, your illustrations, your 3D, and I'm like, do you know how to do what I want you to do? And that's what's easy. It's not like you can tell me, oh, that's my CV. Well, you could be terribly bad and have a very good CV because you've been lucky. And I'm like, show me your portfolio. Let's have a talk. I've been doing a lot of interviews in the past few weeks. And it's always fun because so I turned 26 last September. So usually when I do interviews, and I'm the person interviewing, but I'm the youngest one. So
but you know the stuff.
It's always fun because they're stressing, and I'm like, I'm in my pajamas. Let's chill. I just want to see how you're doing, what kind of person you are, because usually when we do the interview processes, I like to see how's the person, and it's kind of like your podcast in the end. So we just talk like where you're from, what you do, what do you like to do in your free time as well, because that's also interesting as a person. Right. Because, for example, if I have an artist, the person could be really, really good, but if they're not curious about anything, I know that some processes are going to be very complicated with this person, whereas some people are very curious about things. So I'm like, oh, so if we decide to go crazy on the projection, I will actually have someone that can relate to my craziness and my ideas, and not be like, well, I'll do some research because I'm just good technically. Some people, they have very good techniques, and they're jerks as well, for example, because you could have an amazing portfolio. So I'd rather try to discuss with the person first, because in a team, for me, what's important is the communication. Even on a business, I mean, on the human and the business aspect, it's very important, because if the team goes well in general and there's a huge cohesion, people will work better also, because if you work with friends, you don't want to disappoint your friends and you want to help your friends. Sure. So usually things will go quicker, better. People are not trying to fight. You don't have like ego trips. So I'm like, oh no, I'm better than you. No, I am. No. They're like trying to work with towards solutions, and they will respect the team members more because they actually like the team and they actually like the projects they work on. And that's something that I'm really trying to implement. Also, for example, I'm very interested in all the mental health aspects of people. Because usually we have deadlines. We don't really care when people work. I mean, if we have to discuss a deadline and postpone it, we will, definitely. But I don't want someone to be stuck in front of his computer for a whole day because they've been feeling bad. You never know. Like, you had a fight with your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, or you just feel bad because you had a terrible night.
Sure.
That's pointless for me to have someone sit in front of a computer and not work because they don't feel good. I'm like, just take the day for yourself. I just want to have this level of comfort where they're comfortable enough to tell me, okay, I'm not feeling good. I need this day for myself. And I'm like, okay, just go. Because you want your employees or mandatees to work together well, and forcing someone to work when they don't feel like it, that doesn't work well. And anyway, you're going to work a whole day to do shit. And you're probably going to have to just take it over and start over from the beginning on the following day. So that's something we're really trying to work on. That's the communications aspect. What's going well, what's not going well, in terms of feedback as well. I mean, you've probably seen it at school. I don't know if school was the way you liked it to be when you were a child, because they don't have a program that's very adapted. I mean, it's adapted to a very peculiar kind of people. You have different types of intelligence, different types of ways to learn. And I've noticed that not all feedbacks just go the same. I have some developers, I will just say a few words and they will have understood everything perfectly. And sometimes I will say or do something that to me is very clear, but that is not to the person. So that's also something I'm trying to see in the interviews. It's like, how will I, if I work with this person, how will I have to approach the feedback so I don't lose too much time in the production to see how this person behaves, communicates. So I already know, like, when I'll be like, oh, okay, I like it that way. What you did is good, but we have to adjust in this way. Some people, they don't want any compliments, for example. They want like pure hard facts, and you're like, that doesn't work. That here is not. Some people, if you do that, they will have a mental breakdown. For example, I'm very comfortable with someone, like, you could always tell me that my work is shit as long as you can like actually back it up. If you tell me that shit because that's how you're supposed to do it, I don't care. I don't need sugarcoating, but I do know some people, and I've had some employees, when you check it out, if you don't sugarcoat, they will feel personally bad because they're very attached to you. Whereas for me, the result matters. Some people, every time you step, it's like they're cherry little baby. So maybe not say, throw that to the dustbin, because that's not how you do it. And you try to approach it, but there's like a whole pedagogical aspect to it. And I do think that a lot of studio and workplace in general lack this aspect.
Totally. Yeah.
I've worked a tons of jobs. I mean, I've been a gardener. I've worked in offices because I've done a lot of jobs beside my studies, as I said. I taught some kid that had difficulties, and that helped me a lot with what I'm doing now. Like, how do you explain something to someone that has difficulties, and even difficulties that don't really like to say that, because for me it's just that they needed a different approach, because when you explain to them in a different way, they actually have really good grade. So maybe they're not stupid,
right? There's multiple ways to learn
some
anything.
Things maybe are less easy, definitely. Some people are really good at math, some it's more in the languages. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, but it's also in which way you actually approach the subject. Because sometimes it's just, and when you are bad at math, for example, I used to be bad at math, and then I had like amazing grades when I understood how I had to actually approach maths. But I was so persuaded that I was bad at it because I had bad grades, and I was like, but I can't understand the shit this teacher is saying. And I actually had a tutor that explained to me stuff in a way that worked so well for me. I was like, oh, I'm not stupid and bad at math. I'm actually the best in the class now. But it's just the way you approach it. So I do think it's always very important to, I mean, we humans, each person is different from one another. And in game dev, I think that's one of the most colorful words in terms of personalities that have been given to work in. So it's always interesting to see how the people are, what they like, how they do what they like as well.
Right.
I mean, saying I like to draw doesn't mean much. What do you like to draw? What's your process? Why do you like to draw some subjects? If you like nature, environments, what do you look in your environment first? I do a lot of photography, and I noticed that some environment artists, like my boyfriend is a concept artist and an illustrator, and it's really fun because he does a very lovely composition, but if he does photography, I mean, the frame is shit. Every time, the whole frame and composition of the picture. And I've always looked at him and I was like, how can you draw so well? Have such lovely composition, but your pictures are so shit. And it was like, But I'm not looking at it. He was, because I was always
Right.
like, we were going on holidays, went to Scotland together, and he ended up using my pictures for some of his stuff. And I was like, but with your eyes, I mean, I know you know the compositions because I see your drawings. I know that you see what's important. And he was like, but I just want a reference of this mountain. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
I've never looked at it that way. I was like, I will have the reference, but for me, my eye will be like, I want it to be shown in this way. And he's like, reference.
Yeah.
Lovely mountain, lovely tree, river.
That sounds like us.
And I'm like, I want the bigger picture. I want it good. And I was like, oh, so that's why. Because I would never understand. And I was like, I know you have all those fundamentals. I know it. I've seen it. What? How do you do that?
He'll get better as he realizes he needs to actually compose his shots too. That'll make his life a lot easier once he gets that part down.
He's already getting better at it, but it's just.
I mean, I shoot the same way when I just want if I'm like, I just need that tree, and like somebody walks in front of it, I'm like, I don't care, I just need the tree. You know, like, doesn't matter if a dog ran past it when I took the shot. That's just the way it is, man. I have a very expensive camera that it's like what's that thing? My friend was telling me how like the people that make South Park have very expensive software, but they're only using it at like 35% of its abilities. My camera is super nice, but I am not utilizing it to its fullest skill set because I'm just out there taking photographs of what I need to make my life.
And it's actually very complicated to use a good camera properly nowadays. I mean, you have so many settings.
Dude, have you seen the rage for so there's a new Fuji has done a brilliant marketing scam. I'm gonna call it a scam because this is what it is. It's a Fuji 100V, I believe it's called. A bunch of TikTok people started using it. It's not any better than I have a Canon M50. It's not any better than my M50. It does have some extra functionality, but it's like at the base level, it's I want to say it's like a $600, $800 camera body, but it's picked up so much steam on social media right now. It's selling for $2,000 to $3,000.
It's the principle of selling a donkey for a racing horse. I mean, like, I've met some marketing people. Sometimes they're insane. I mean, even with like I know this guy that used to work with one of my teachers when I was because I did a bachelor in numerical arts. And when I was in school, like I got to hear from this guy, and it was impressive. Like he would sell you a little wooden cabin as a palace, and will still make the client believe that it's what he wanted. And it was impressive because sometimes you would hear the clients, and you would be like, "This guy is high. That's not possible with this budget and this time." And the guy would always say, "Yes, we can do it." And then he would present something that was definitely not what the client asked for, but he would still convince the client
that it's sell it. Yeah,
that's what you got. You got to be able to talk the talk.
And it was like, God damn it.
That's insane.
I mean, that's what's happening with like.
Confounded by that.
I feel like what Fuji has done now is they've realized, okay, these photographers. I obviously I don't have the inside track on Fuji, but I very much feel like they've given a bunch of high name photographers this camera. These guys went out there, shot a bunch of beautiful. I mean, the photos that this thing makes is beautiful, and it does stuff that you would do in like Lightroom, essentially, like the filters, the light levels, all the stuff the camera does for you as you're taking the shot. So like, and then they're just posting it up on TikTok and socials, and then this camera is worth 3 times the cost of its value actually. And the other camera, and then here's the kicker, which is why I feel like it's part of this brilliant scam by Fuji. They've got 4 other models that are just under this camera. And they've got people doing videos on YouTube saying, you don't have to buy the 100V for $3,000. You can just buy the E6 or whatever it is for $600. And then people are scrambling to buy these other cameras where it's like, you can just, I have a Sony AX6000 as well, and it shoots beautiful photographs. Again, I'm not a photographer. So like, I shoot for, my reference. I don't shoot for one of the viewers said, there's a different mindset for photography for composition versus photography for texture and reference, which is I'm shooting for texture and reference. I'm getting better at photographing for composition because it may at some point reduce some stress on me wanting to use the whole thing in a piece somewhere.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I don't need that. But this Fuji camera, I will admit, I looked at it and I wanted one until I saw the cost, and then I was like, "Fuck this shit," you know. But then here's the counterpoint: is there's photographers out there who are like, "Don't buy this camera. Buy this cheap Canon for like $300. Point and shoot, and you get beautiful photos from it." Like,
yeah.
But like to your story about this guy, you can sell people on things if you can talk the talk, right?
Yeah. It's like some cars. Sometimes you will pay the brand more. Like I have some friends sometimes like, oh, I need a new car, and they talk to me about like this very specific car that I want, and I'm like, but it is like twice the price than this brand that has the same model with actually less issues. Because like I had a friend recently, she bought Golf VV Volkswagen Golf GTI, all the options. I mean, it would scratch your head. And it was like
street racing around Switzerland.
It was like 54,000, and I was like, "That's a small car. You just need a small car. There's a bit of power." And I was like, "But if you look, for example, at the competitive model with Kia, for example, the Kia Ceeds, you can have more or less the same options, but it will be like 15 to 20k less."
Right.
Because you don't pay for the brand. But actually, a Volkswagen car usually, I mean, you have a warranty for what, 3 years? Kia is 7 years. They have a lot of issues with electronics. But people are like, oh, this car is good because it's been around for a while, and I've heard that it's good.
Yeah.
And when you look at the brand itself and you start knowing a bit about cars, you're like, not that good. And
right.
I mean, I'm very glad to actually know about cars now. You can't even work
on. I remember I looked at a Volkswagen when I was younger. Mm-hmm. You can't work on the engines that well. They're like not compact. They're like everything's like compressed inside there, and it's on purpose.
Yeah, it's kind of like stacked on each other. Yeah.
Yes, it's stacked on each other, and if you want to get to something, you gotta like know how to take the engine apart and put it back together.
So we were just having a similar conversation about this with Cintiqs and other like tablet companies recently too.
Yeah, I mean, so I invested in. I loved my Cintiq till it died. I'm not going to spend. When I bought this machine, the Cintiq, it was $2,000, which is way too expensive for a tablet. But when I bought it, I was one of those artists that was convinced that's the thing you need to make beautiful art, which is not true. But this year, I was telling Andrew I invested in a Huion, which is just as good. I actually got to finish setting it up tomorrow because I got an arm for it. But the only difference between that that screen and my Cintiq is there's no touch capability. So if you like to zoom in and move around, Huion doesn't do it. I talked to a rep at Huion. They're like, it's just not what we do, because in their research it showed that most people just still use a keyboard and their pen. The pen.
There's so many short keys and hotkeys you'd have anyway that your hand's already there.
Well, the Huion came with a remote too that I can program for hotkeys.
Yeah.
And it was cheaper. It was only.
It's very impressive, the difference in price. Even
dude, the Huion was
so used.
$800.
Yeah, but Wacom has the whole market, so
they're very
it's
good.
Always a bit complicated. Like, for example, like I bought an iPad Pro because that's the only thing that I really like from Apple. But because it was very light and very easy to carry everywhere I would go, because that was my issues, because I was like, oh, so if I check at the price of the Wacom, that's the equivalent to the iPad Pro. That's that. Okay, then because I was still a student when I bought my iPad, I was like, okay, so then I would have to pay this license for Photoshop. And depending on the tablet, I would have I need a computer on the side. And it's true, like, sometimes I like to draw, and I used to like to draw in the open air or paint. Sure. I started digital art very, very late. Late 2018. Before it was just like pencils, painting, acrylic, aquarels and stuff. Like, I was like, even now, sometimes I have some artists that I work with, and they show me some stuff, and I'm like, that's how you do it digitally then. Because I have this very like traditional art approach to anything I do. But with the iPad, I really like that. I have all my brushes. I can just take it out. I even forget that I have it in my bag sometimes because it's very light. because I'm not fond of Apple, but mostly because of what you said about all this. I can't open my iPad if there's an issue. My computer, like if there's any issue, I can open it, tear it apart, check what's wrong, and if I have to change one tiny bit of pieces that's not working, I can do it myself. With my iPad, if my iPad just starts to go poopy, well, either I go to Apple and pay a very expensive service, or I buy a new one.
No, this tower I built here,
it works.
This tower, I just take the side off, change the parts out. Like Andrew and I were just talking about new video cards. I'm patiently waiting to. I would love a 4090 in here, but man, not gonna pay for that. It's so. It's the hype. Anytime somebody hypes that thing, anything up, the cost goes up, and it's stupid because there's people out there who are stupid paying that high cost, and then it fucks the rest of us, right? So we just have to wait it out. Either way, we're a little bit over time. Even though we're having a great conversation, because I feel like we can keep going, but at some point this video is going to cut. So I was going to say, if there's anything that you wanted to maybe talk about that we didn't talk about, or anything you want to promote, maybe you want to promote one of your company or your game.
Well, I mostly have one thing to say to game dev people in general. You can find anything on internet. Be careful with the school. I mean, my school was great because I mean, my company. I mean, and I could advertise stuff, but I mean, I have all my social medias, and I will post whenever I post. That's fine. But I think that's something that's important for artists in general. You have a lot of life hacks, things that you have to search for on internet. A lot of communities help each other. And when I started my studies, there's a lot of things that I would have loved to know. That even like flipped normals, for example, you have a lot of tutorials, and don't ever hesitate to send a message to the guy who's actually making the tutorial because that helped me a lot, because I was very shy at first. I mean, in the worst case, the person's not going to answer.
Sure.
But if you start something and you're like, oh, that's interesting, even drawing, that anything for me, I mean, you do have a bit of talent that can help, but it's a lot of hard work, mainly. So if you like to do something, you can do it. Maybe you will need more work than some other people, but don't hesitate to ask. I mean, I met you because I was like, oh, I love this guy's colors. And I remember I just because I was discussing with my parents, and I was like, yeah, I've got a podcast at like 2 a.m. And my parents were like, the fuck?
But like, we'll catch that later.
Guy. And I was like, well, that was on Twitter, and I just really liked this guy's colors on his illustrations, and we started talking like that, and I was like, I love the colors, and I love the way you approach the paintings, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And when I see how you discuss like how you work on an illustration, then you can learn a lot of things. And I do think that a lot of young people are actually scared to reach out because
I mean, I tell artists. I talk to artists, new artists, all the time, because a lot of them always want to approach me, and because most people who know me on a personal level know that I do fairly well at shows, which is that's just lucky, you know. I don't think there's any skill. There's no extra skill set I have that goes in that area. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up like talking the talk, so I can sell a product if I really want to. But the art, it has to come first. So I always tell these artists, I'm like, focus on your art, man. Make the art you want to make, and everything else will flow into it, right? Like a lot of stuff is starting to happen for me now. This is my 9th year doing this, and now Andrew knows about some of these projects, but things are coming into fruition now. 9 years, okay? 9 years of just. I know my friends hate the word hustle, but it's 9 years of hustling and working and just sticking to the thing. It's there are days of stress, but for the most part, it's me just doing the thing I like to do, right? And
that's something that artists have been doing forever. Like once a year I go to these art weekends in the south of France, where we do have some talks. It's organized by the Warden Light Studios. They're both Swiss and live in France now, but they were concept artists on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
That's cool.
They did a lot of work, and they're an adorable couple. And I remember there was this guy from Disney that had work on Tarzan that came out in 1999, and the guy was very approachable, but at first I was like, I was 3 years old and this guy was already a reference in the industry, and I was like, should I go and talk to him? And actually this guy is adorable, and still look at, I mean, we discuss on Facebook sometimes, like he's very open.
Sure.
And like but I still feel like it's much easier to talk to someone when they're in front of you. But sometimes you don't have the opportunity to go to those conventions, to go to those gatherings. So don't hesitate to actually text the people. I mean, like I have some people that never answered sometimes on Twitter. When I started my company,
just busy, man.
I hit people on Twitter because I was like, I started my company and I see like I like the approach you have, and I had a few questions to see like how people handle their businesses. I mean, some people are like, I have my small indie studio, and I was like, okay, what's the experience for you? And I do think we always have to learn from other people.
I learned a ton from other artists. I mean, we have a show here that happens once a year called LuxCon. It's I don't know how long it's going to be around. Hopefully it'll be around for a minute, but that's where we all kind of catch up and we get to see like a lot of our artists that we look up to. But like, early on, and I started doing this stuff in 2014, and early on I did exactly what you said. I would just reach out to artists and ask them for advice on things, and then slowly became friends with them. And then so whenever sometimes people would be like, oh, this artist, how are you friends with them? I'm like, I just started talking to them. Like most artists are very approachable as long as you're not like up their ass or bothering them. Like if you're like, hey, can I get some advice on something? You're like, yeah, can you give me till Friday and we can talk? Or if you're not aggressively bothering them, they want most artists want other artists to do well.
And for example, the couple for Warden Light Studio, I really love the story on how they came to work on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and then on Love, Death and Robot with Alberto Mielgo, who's I guess you know the guy, but he's not director, and he also does a lot of illustrations, and he does a lot of acrylic painting. But from that, he does pretty amazing digital art. But it's really fun because like there's this huge painting he did of Spider-Man where you see Spider-Man like that with the whole city. It's like 700 layers of painting on that, and like they were the Trojan Horse was a unicorn festival. It's a huge art gathering in Europe.
Yep.
And they had a project that was cancelled because of Disney issues back in the days. And they saw Mielgo at the bar afterwards, and they were like, "Oh, I don't know if you remember, but we were supposed to work on this project together, and it got aborted." And they just started chatting. And the guy was like, and Mielgo was like, yeah, I remember, that was fun. We have to do something together one day. Haha, that would be fun. And like, a month later or two, he just sent them an email for Spider-Man. So you never know. You just reach out to people, and sometimes you'll be like, oh, you can have opportunity that you're creating without knowing that you're actually creating those opportunities. I mean, they were already set in the industries and knowing what they were doing, but I mean, that was still a huge step for them. So like, don't be scared to talk to people. In the worst case, then it was a loss of few minutes.
Yeah, that's worst case, they'll tell you I've approached artists who are like, I really can't deal with this right now, and you're like, okay, cool, moving on. It happens. Not everyone wants to talk, But yeah, okay, that's a good way to end it. I gotta close this out, man. We're gonna lose some footage here. But thank you for getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to be on the show. I really appreciate it.
Now it's 3:21. That's
hey man, it's only 8 o'clock here, and I'm gonna go eat some food. So
I will go eat some food, and then I will go back to bed because now I'm hungry again.
There you go. Yeah, gonna eat a cheese wheel or something.
I have some lasagna that's left over. So
oh my god, that sounds delicious. I'm gonna make whatever's in the fridge. Thanks for all the people that are watching and asking questions. I appreciate that. Our next guest is, oh boy, one second. I gotta look at my calendar. Oh yeah, Stephanie Cook. She'll be on. Well, she's on March 10th. I might have somebody on next week, but I don't want to say it until I can confirm it. So please just check the socials, and I'll post about it on Sunday. All right, I'm going to take us offline. Oh wow, we had a Twitch viewer who was up at 4:30 to watch this. Thanks. That's crazy. What are you people doing with yourselves? But I appreciate you. Thank you.